Come on down to the Law Student Lounge with your host, attorney Ryan McKeen, where law students like you tell their stories. So pull up a chair and join us in the lounge.
Hi, it's Connecticut attorney Ryan McKeen here, and I'm here with Claire Stermer. Claire, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So nice to see you. And Claire, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I am a 3L student at UConn School of Law. I am working as a human resources generalist at Connecticut Trial Firm. And I started going to law school with a passion of employment and labor law and how that intersects in the HR field. So that's basically who I am and what led me to law school.
Now, did you go to law school straight out of college?
No, so I actually took a 2-year break, partially due to the pandemic, but it was kind of a happy accident the way it worked out. So I double majored in undergrad in human resource management and theater. So I wanted to have a career in theater originally. So I started working at a local regional theater company, and I did that for 2 years and made the decision that I wanted to go back to college. And that is when I started simultaneously studying for the LSAT. And it worked out because due to the pandemic, I was able to focus just on studying. And that's when I started applying to law school.
So how did you go about studying for the LSAT?
So I initially just started researching on Google. How do you apply to law school? What should I do? And it led me to buy the Power Score Bible Trilogy textbooks. So I had purchased some LSAT study materials from Amazon, and I learned quickly that the textbooks weren't going to be my best course of studying. I am a visual learner, and especially during the pandemic when, the days just bled into each other, I knew I needed like a tutor or something more structured with my studying. So I ended up finding a LSAT tutor online, and I never did one-on-one sessions, but he provided a service that you could like join group sessions and work through problems. And so I did a variation of textbooks and using online materials and group sessions. So I kind of did a little bit of everything, and ultimately I studied for roughly 9 months. And I took the LSAT actually 3 times. So it worked out because, again, the pandemic gave me extra time to prepare for law school. So once I started learning in what areas I needed some extra prep in, then I kind of shifted gears and focus and started retaking the LSAT.
So I started law school in 2002, so I think I would have taken the LSAT in 2001. That makes sense to me. And at that time, I think people pretty much only took it once. Mm-hmm. Is it common, like amongst your classmates, to have taken it several times?
I certainly think so. I mean, you see a bunch of variation online, but on what they recommend. From my understanding, that you can take the LSAT numerous times, and the law schools are, going to use your best score as what they use in admissions. So for me, I just felt, okay, if I have some extra time I can dedicate to studying, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to see that my score improved. So, I mean, of course it does add up, paying for the test numerous times. But I thought that it was going to be worth the investment in my case.
Sure. I mean, for me, one of the great regrets I have is I never was able to take an LSAT prep course. Really, primarily when I studied, there weren't online options. You could get a book, which I got, or you had to go in person to a place, and there was only like 1 or 2 companies that really did these kinds of review courses, and they were very, very expensive. But I think for anybody out there, I think your point is a really good one, because the LSAT score really matters. And I was able to get
Mm-hmm.
into, colleges and law schools that I wanted to go to, but I wasn't able to get like maybe the kind of scholarship money that I had hoped for.
Right.
And when I was able for the first time in my life to really take an exam prep course was for the bar exam. And I saw how much, I was able to raise my score, because it's, a lot of it is not how smart you are. So if somebody's out there, it's not how smart you are, how good of a student you are. It's how much you know about the test and how you're able to prepare and to take that test. So, I mean, that's awesome that you were able to do that. Would you recommend that people out there take a course if they're thinking about going to law school?
I think the best advice I would give is explore all the online resources. I know Khan Academy has some free services and free LSAT tests that you can take, which certainly help get you familiar with the format, and you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on tutors if you don't need to. So I would suggest exploring the free options first, and also like connect with people in the community that have gone through the process before, because I feel that everyone is very generous in lending you their old books and resources. So I think the big takeaway is time is your friend. If you give yourself enough time to study for the LSAT and prepare on entering law school, you can not only improve your score, but you'll find out the best way that you should study.
And you went to, you had some work experience. And how has, I went to law school pretty much right out of college. I had some work experience. I was able to work at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I graduated college early, which is a giant mistake. Like, kids out there, don't do that.
I did the same thing.
Oh boy.
A year early, and I got gypped.
Yeah,
I feel like
I agree. I think I don't have many regrets in life, but one of which was graduating college early. Like, what was I thinking? And the other of which was not taking an LSAT prep course. So we've covered like all of life's advice, I think, in the first 7 minutes of this episode. But yeah, no, I think it's I should not have done that for obvious reasons. Kids, stay in school as long as you can. Enjoy it. How so you do have 2 years work experience. How does that, what was that adjustment like when you decided to go to law school? How did that, did you feel more prepared, behind? How was that?
Well, I think it was a mix of both, because having some real world work experience, I think, enhanced my law school experience. I could bring different perspectives to the table, especially coming from the theater world. My non-traditional path, I think, served me in a few ways, but I also think it led to a lot of imposter syndrome. I did not have a poli-sci degree. I did not have internships at local firms. My background coming into law school is very different, and especially having some break made me feel like, okay, what is my theater background serving me? Like, how does this aid me? So I think it led to some feelings of like, do I really belong here? But ultimately, reflecting on that now, I think having the work experience, it's part of my story. It's part of who I am. And now I understand that journey led me to, the law student that I am supposed to be.
I think you bring up a great point there, which is that a lot of law students feel imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of law students feel like, and I think some of what you mentioned here about I worked at a local firm, or I worked at the legislature or some government
Mm-hmm.
agency, like that is, different. That is other people's way of processing their own feelings of imposter syndrome.
Correct.
And they're trying to make themselves feel good because they're essentially scared. And when you're going through that process, like it's really hard to understand, and it's hard to see when you're in law school. But I look back 20 years later, having done a whole bunch of things, and I look back and I'm like, nobody who worked in a law firm in college like did anything of significance, like relevant to
Yeah.
sort of life experience. And maybe you have people I know, we had paralegals who went back to school who had very significant experience, that being different. But,
Mm-hmm.
I the first time I went to court ever, Claire, was at law school orientation. I had
Okay.
never been in court. I didn't know lawyers. Nobody in my family was a lawyer.
Same.
And I think a lot of people who do go to law school, like their families are lawyer, their dad's a judge, their grandfather was a lawyer. But it's important. You said something really important, which is you identified it, you labeled that feeling and that behavior, which I think is critical to anybody who's going through the emotional transition to law school.
Oh, that's it. It's an emotional transition for sure. It takes time, and I think especially in the first year of law school when you don't know anyone, you're adjusting to this brand new style of learning. It's it's tough, and I think that you have to own who you are. And for me, the theater thing, I kind of played it up being like, all right, I have great oral skills, whether I believed that or not, that's what I was bringing into the classroom. And so I was the first to recognize, all right, I do not know civil procedure. I do not have this background understanding of criminal law that, some of my classmates had these prior passions in. That wasn't me, but I had, skills in other areas that I think have helped me.
And I think that's a really important thing also to identify and to accept. And I think there's a lot of maturity there, and I mean that in like a very positive way. I'm not sure, maybe at 23 years old when I went to law school, that may even have had access to that kind of perspective. Because there is, I felt like, a pressure to be a certain way, or that you're behind, or
Absolutely.
that you're this or that. And there's a lot of people who, look, they're scared, and they're willing to play into that in a way, and like, even if it's not intentional, but like they're willing to address their own insecurities that way. But I can tell you, having been a lawyer for almost 20 years at this point, having witnessed fantastic lawyering and all of it, there's no common background. There's
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people who I know who have science degrees, people I know who did theater, people I know who are scared to speak in front of a room, people who are very skilled at speaking. There's no common denominator background.
Right.
And in fact, I think, and I know that uh, the practice of law really, at its highest levels, involves teams of people with different experiences, different talents, different perspectives on problems, which is really all lawyers do. Is we deal all day with problems, with challenges, in every kind of arena, and having different perspectives, different eyes, different skills on a problem is tremendously valuable, because no one person can do it all. Like, that's not,
No.
law is, yes, you have to do a lot of work by yourself, but it's fundamentally, at a very high level, collaborative.
Right. And I think that is why finding your team of people in law school, your friends, is so important, because especially with imposter syndrome, it's easy to be like, question, what are you doing? Am I enough? But once I found my core group of friends that really confirmed that I had value and I brought things to the table and I deserved to have a seat in the classroom, that's when I think my confidence started boosting. So I think once you make your connections and find your support system within the law school community, the ball kind of gets rolling a little bit easier.
So, how would someone out there who may be looking to start law school, or is just new into the experience, how would you advise somebody to go about doing
Mm. I would say if you have anyone in your life that has gone through it before, definitely reach out. Use your Facebook and say, hey, I'm considering going to law school. Use your LinkedIn, explore your community, because people in the legal field, at least in my experience, everybody wants to help each other. Everyone wants to tell you what worked for them and what didn't. So I would say start, building those relationships and picking people's brains about what they think, would be good advice for you, because I certainly did not have any close family members in my life that went to law school, but I did have some friends who would tell me, hey, listen, I think you should apply at this time of year because maybe that helps scholarships, and you don't know that unless maybe you have some wisdom from other people telling you that. So I would say if you're going to start, find some people that can maybe steer you in the right direction, because having that support is so important.
You hit on something I think is my favorite part of the legal profession, which is that lawyers are inherently, almost like to a person, helpful of other lawyers. Like the challenges of what we do, of what lawyers do on a day in and day out basis is so immense. That your very best lawyers are your most generous lawyers. They have an abundance mindset. They take those calls, they give the advice, and they're open to receiving it. And so even what you said in law school is true, but carry that into the legal profession.
Right.
And find people who are willing to share, people who are willing to do it. And I think really in 20 years of this, like the very vast majority of lawyers are amongst the very most generous people that I have ever met.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, especially in my experience, that's what I've found to be true. So I would advise everyone to take that wisdom and roll with it.
So how many law schools do you apply to?
I think I applied to almost like 10, which was a lot. And at the time I applied to law school, I did not know what geographic region I wanted to go to. Some law school programs I applied specifically for evening programs. Some I applied for day programs. I kind of wanted to throw my options out there and see what money I got back and go from there. I did a similar thing in undergrad, and so that's kind of where I started. Just explore options. If I was remotely interested in the school, I basically applied. And as the scholarships came in and costs and everything, that's kind of when I started taking a closer look at to what made sense for me. And ultimately I landed on UConn. The cost for me was great being an in-state student. So that made the most sense. And also I really love the greater Hartford community. I'm exploring all my relationships in this area. That's where the theater company I worked in was from. My other jobs that I've had, has been in this area. So going into law school is stressful, and being close to home and having that comfort and being around, the people, that support system, I think was really what made me choose a local school.
Throughout this whole process of law school and life and being a lawyer, knowing yourself and being clear on what it is that you want is so important. And not, there's a perception in law school. I think that law school has, at least when I went, or in my view of the legal profession, defines success incredibly narrowly.
Sure.
And it's like, you got into this school, or you got this score on the LSAT, or you clerked for this judge, or you worked for this firm. And it's all kind of for naught, because the happiest, most successful people I know, they do what you did, which is they look and they say, what is important to me?
Right. And nobody else cares. Not one person has ever asked me what LSAT score I got. And I wish I didn't care so much about, people's perceptions of that, because I might have been happy applying to law school with my first score. And, it's a hard journey. And I think once you kind of realize what are the steps you can take to make it easier for yourself is so important. And so for me, making it easier was being around my family and staying in Connecticut. So, and of course, there's been times where I'm like, am I at the right school? And I don't think that feeling necessarily goes away, because, as you explore job opportunities, like there's always places that you could move to and explore other facets, but I think, you just got to figure out the balance of trusting your gut, trusting your intuition, and being confident in your decision.
So I remember when I applied to law school, there was like a big thing, like, what are you doing the summer before law school to prepare? Which I always thought was kind of like hysterical. And I'm gonna ask you the question, but I'm gonna lead with my advice, which is probably something I shouldn't do. My advice is always like, hey, enjoy summer, like get out, enjoy the outside, enjoy your friends, enjoy life before all of this. In general, do you have any advice for what somebody who may be thinking about going to law school or heading into law school in the fall should be doing with their summer?
Yeah, I agree with your advice completely. For me, I said before law school, I was pursuing my theater passions. I am glad I did that because I had fun. And sure, it, wasn't directly correlated to my legal career, but I enjoyed it and I was happy. And I think the best thing you can do going into law school is probably being the least stressed you can be, because it's a big change, and I think giving yourself the space to, you know, read things that you want to read before you go to law school. Read the books you want to read. Go on vacations. Take that time, because once you go to law school, your schedule changes quite a bit. So for me, I worked at a daycare leading up to the summer of law school, and I continued working at a daycare. And it was a good balance for me because law school, the challenges that come along with it and the stress, I liked having the separate space where I had fun and I could sing and I could dance and get some fresh air. And it was a good mental break away from the coursework. And I think having that summer of low stress served me well.
All right. So you come into law school, and I remember the first few weeks or months of law school being very stressful. Like, people are trying to figure out, it's a different method of learning, the Socratic method. You used to read books about telling you things, and now you're just reading cases.
Right.
And you're exposed to concepts and words that you've never been exposed to, most likely. What are some things that helped you through the very earliest periods of going to law school?
I think it was finding friends. Find friends fast. Find your people, because there were so many times in class where I'll be the first to admit, on my laptop, I was messaging, my new friends, like, what did she just say? I have no idea what mens rea means. Like, how am I supposed to know? And so finding people that could laugh it off with you and confirm, not everyone else knows what they're saying either. That made me so much more comfortable. And I think I think just having your friends really, really, really helps.
So, one of the differences in law school, and I assume it's still true, is that, most of your grade, most of your grades ride on a final at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's very different than getting feedback all along and taking home, papers and writing things. Do you have any advice for any things that really helped you through your first series of exams?
Yeah, I think if you can talk to upperclassmen and ask them their study habits, and again, everyone's willing to share their knowledge. They're willing to tell you, hey, from my experience, this professor is probably looking for this. So I think connect with the people in the law school community and use them as guidance. They've been through it, so if they're willing to share some insight on their exam experience, that certainly helps. And I think you have to accept how different it is from undergrad, especially for me with a theater degree. The way I was, had exams previously in undergrad was so different from going to law school when, like you said, your grade hinges on one final exam that's on a curve. That, sounds so bizarre. But so once I accepted, okay, it is what it is. This is how everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's going through this new territory. It's rough waters for all of us. Then it kind of seemed more manageable. Once I accepted, this is just how things are done. And there are a lot of resources online. Like I watched YouTube videos of people talking about their law school experience and, went online and read different law school blogs. And some of them are like, how to get over your 1L grades. And I think reading those things just confirms like everyone, goes through the same experience. You're not always going to be satisfied with your performance on the one final exam you have, but it's part of the process. And I think, do the best you can do. Make sure that you have, tried to figure out your study habits the best you can, and use your peers as a resource will definitely help.
And I think that's all sort of, it's just all fantastic advice. One of the things you brought up, which just triggered this thought in my head, was like you said the word mens rea. And I always talk, I have friends who do criminal work, whether it's prosecution, defense, and in law school I worked in a criminal court, as a student intern, and got to try a speeding ticket case. That was my first trial.
That's awesome.
I got a conviction. That we've never had Connecticut has never been more fervently represented on a $75 infraction case. Conviction.
That's awesome.
But I think one of the things that you would never hear in that courtroom is the word mens rea,
Right.
because it's really disconnected from what people who are practicing actually do. And one of the things I think a lot about is sort of legal education and its relationship to practice, and really its disconnect from practice. But I'm on one side of the mic, you're on the other side of the mic. What I'm going to ask you is sort of, what lessons have you internalized, or have you come to believe or been taught in law school about the practice of law?
That's a really good question. And honestly, I think my first year, I did not know what the practice of law meant. In my first year, I felt so focused and knee deep in academia that the thought of ever going to court or working as counsel in corporate, I had no idea what that even meant, because I spent, you spend so much time reading cases and you're like, how does this play out in the real world? And so I think once you start taking classes that give you some real practical experience, that's kind of when things start clicking. But I think law school is a challenge in terms of finding that balance of learning the books and how you apply that. And for me, I took this class called The Role of the In-House Counsel this past semester, and I actually cried after the first class, and it was tears of relief, because it was the first class in law school that I heard a professor speak about something that actually connected. I was like, that is what I want to do. That is why I'm here. And it was the first time in 2 years. So it was my 4th semester of law school, and finally I was like, okay, like I can see how this applies into your day-to-day job. And so I think I would just like to remind people, like, it takes some time for you to figure out how it plays out in the real world. For me, it's 2 years, and I'm just now learning what types of courses I should be taking to kind of aid me in the direction that I want to go in. And having that one professor has already really changed my outlook on law school, because now I can see, okay, it's not just reading. It's more than that. But it took a really great professor, who I will say is not a practicing attorney. He is actually retired, and his experience is so different from, I think, a lot of the professors at law school who have like simply devoted their career to academia. And it's been refreshing to have a professor who is sharing actual work experience. For me, it's made the dots connect.
And so what is it that you plan to do? You've got 2 years left, right?
Yes.
And so you've gone through the courses you have to take.
Right.
You've taken some maybe you thought you should take. You had one that
Mhm.
sparked something for you. What is it that you're going to look for, and other law students should look for, by means of getting practical experience?
Yeah, so I think the career services at schools, I think everyone should really explore those, the people that work in career services, because they really will help aid you in finding like field placements and clinics that you can do within your local community and become involved with. And for me, my next course of action is really just to take classes that I'm interested in. Now that I took the required classes, I'm not focused on taking the classes that I've heard about, maybe is like an easier A. I don't know if anything in law school is an easy A, but I want to take classes that I'm interested in. And because I think it's important for me to be surrounded in the classroom with people who are like-minded in the way that we have similar career interests, and to build those relationships with people in the classroom, I think is just a great networking skill. Eventually, we're all going to be practicing attorneys. And so my goal is to take classes that I'm interested in, and also just, as I expand my legal network, I'm really just planning to have the attorneys in my life help lead me and, bestow wisdom upon me, because, your professors are great in so many ways, but I think I am just so excited to learn from attorneys in the real world. But that also takes the effort of you going out on your own. And
So what I heard you saying is to take the classes that you're really interested in.
yeah, I definitely think that will serve you, just because you want to make sure that you're refining your skills in the area of law that you think you might want to practice. And also, by taking classes in what you think you're interested might lead you to find out that that's actually not what you want to do. I certainly had that realization early on, and I'm glad that I took some classes that, I took alone. I took them without some of my classmates and friends being in them. And I think I went through a period of like, oh, maybe I should take energy law because my best friend's taking it. But I'm glad I didn't, because that's not what I wanted to do. And I took a course that, is going to help shape what I think my legal career is going into. So I think, take the classes that you think will serve you best, and it'll confirm or deny if that passion is true.
I think that that's also good advice. I remember when I was in law school, like I felt, it was the first time my family go to college, and I felt a real pressure, I think, to be serious.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up doing dumb things like taking income tax too.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because, believe me, like I am not passionate about tax.
Yeah.
I am happy as a business owner now that I understand taxation issues pretty well, and at least know some of the terms and can be conversant in different things like 1031 like-kind exchange. But it's not something at all that I'm like dispositionally passionate about.
Right.
And I probably could have learned those concepts in other ways, because I know if you're going to be great at something, in anything, but especially in law, like you have to have some underlying passion for it.
Right. And that's, again, law school is tough. So like if you have a class that you at least enjoy being in, and you're like enjoy your professor lecturing about it, and the cases are interesting to you, that helps in so many ways. Because I really like employment law, and I took employment discrimination law, and some days you'd have to read over 100 pages in this very dense textbook that has topics that are difficult to read through. But for me, it didn't feel like pulling teeth reading at midnight, because I enjoyed learning about it. Whereas if I took classes in other areas, I don't think in some classes when you're reading late at night, it's like, it's hard to get through.
It is, and as you become a lawyer, it'll also be hard to get through. And
Sure.
and and that being said, I think sort of one of the fun things is that even if you go to law school and you're like, I don't know what I want to do, and I always resented that sort of question and being asked like, well, what do you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I don't know.
I don't know what I want to do, but also maybe what I want to do hasn't even been invented yet. And there are areas of law now that people practice in, cannabis law or cryptocurrency
Right.
or social media and sort of the impact. And you're going to see, you're going to see artificial intelligence and whole areas of law develop around that.
Yeah.
That just didn't exist when I graduated law school in 2005. And so I think it's important for students to know that, not only is it okay to know what you don't want to do. I think it's more important to know exactly like, hey, I never want to be a tax attorney. Like that, like check that box, like rule that out. But also to be open to emerging ideas and emerging markets and really the complications of complicated financial transactions that go on today that didn't go on 20 years ago, that require lawyers and adaptation and, the big issue for the next, 10 to 20 years in legal is like, what are the implications of artificial intelligence? Like, what are human rights? Like, what, where when somebody creates a voice that sounds like Drake on AI,
what does that mean?
What are his rights? Did AI generate that? Like, does the person who put the prompt generate it? Does the coder? Like, who owns that? What does that mean? Or, conversely, like, what does it mean in the criminal area where, what if police officers or law enforcement officers start using it in ways to entrap people or ways to, correct inconsistencies in their police reports?
Right. There's so much to explore in all those areas that is important to just, like, keep your eyes open to. And I think the best advice that I've been given is, or I don't know if it's really advice, but it's just to remember that your path reveals itself. And for me, basically every job or, opportunity I've had, I've almost fell into. And I just think that, you got to remember, like, you're going to end up where you're meant to be. And so whether I end up employment law, I don't know. My path is going to reveal itself. I'm going to end up in the area that I'm supposed to be in. The opportunities are going to present itself to me because, I'm working at it, I'm learning, I'm doing, if you're taking the right steps, if you're following what you should follow, your path is it's all going to fall into place. So I think there's a lot of pressure, like you said, to what are you doing? What are you doing this summer? Like, what do you want to study? Yada, yada, yada. And, once you kind of accept, like, okay, like, I don't need to know right now. I still have 2 more years of law school. I might not know in 2 more years. Maybe my path is that I stay in this role for 10 years. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then my path takes a different turn. And that's okay.
It is okay. And, one of my favorite sayings or pieces of advice that I give anybody, I give it to myself, give it to my kids, is it all works out in the end. Which is really what you had said. And, looking back at, where my law school classmates are 20 years later, many of them some of them are, I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer and that's what they do. Right. And that's fantastic. And others of them have been like, I want to be a criminal defense lawyer. And became one friend in particular, and he does it. And he's like, you know what? It's 5-6 years in, I can't see myself doing this another 40.
Right.
And so ultimately he gets into, now he's doing work with like cyber insurance and Bitcoins and Lloyd's of London and, all sorts of like reinsurance work on that. But he couldn't have foreseen that.
No.
And I think like, different things happen. Everything happens for a reason in our lives. And, I guess the message out there for anybody is just like, yeah, you will fall into it.
Yep.
Keep an open mind, keep an open heart, look, um, and things will happen for you if you're out there trying to make them happen. I mean, it's not just like,
No.
sit on your couch and play, I don't know if the kids play Fortnite or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
No. But if you're working hard, good things will come your way.
That is correct. Now, sort of, I know a huge topic in legal profession in general is the bar exam.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your sort of thoughts on the bar exam, or what are the sort of attitudes about your classmates regarding the bar exam?
So since I'm halfway through law school, it's just now for like becoming a topic of conversation. I think one thing that was very helpful is a lot of professors basically said in my first year, don't even think about that. That is, worlds away. And it's been helpful to, basically put that in the back of my brain and store that for later, because it's allowed myself to focus directly on the classes I'm taking in the moment. So to answer your question, I haven't really thought too much about the bar exam. And I think in this next year is when I start checking off some of the other courses that will help me prepare for the bar exam, like evidence. And so I haven't even completed some of those topics that will be tested on the bar exam. So I feel like I'm still one more year out from really exploring the resources that I should use for bar prep.
Yeah, see, I really resent the bar exam in a lot of ways, in that I just feel like it's a test I did really well on, because it was the first test I could ever take bar prep to study for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was it is, at the end of it is a memorization test. And I was good at memorizing things.
Okay.
No, but it tested nothing else. Like I did so many multi-state exams that I would get a question, I'd be like, I've read this fact pattern before. The answer is C. And that happened multiple times on the test. And how does that have any bearing on whether or not I'm a good lawyer,
right,
or anything? And the cost of it was so high. I couldn't work for that summer. I had to pay for bar prep.
Mm-hmm.
I had to wait from May until November, essentially. I got sworn in October 31st on Halloween. And it's so there's 6 months where I couldn't work as a lawyer. And I just feel like the test for it to remain at such a high cost. And ultimately, look, the other thing is for people who say well, look, it protects the public or whatever. It's nonsense. Something like 95% of people who take the test eventually pass it.
Okay.
It's not a great filter. If you keep trying,
it's the bare minimum.
If you keep trying, so we've weeded out 5%, and maybe those are people who shouldn't have gone to law school or shouldn't have graduated law school, and in different ways. So it's I feel like it's something that is a tremendous cost, and also it's so bizarre to me that it tests nothing related to law.
Right.
And in fact, a lot of what you will learn for the bar exam, I mean, evidence is the exception, because lots of states, and Connecticut sort of similarly follows some version of the federal rules of evidence. So that's sort of unique. But a lot of, the tort law that you learn, or the criminal law that you learn, or even the contractual law that you learn has been abdicated by state statute. It's just been,
right,
the legislature said, nah, we don't like what the courts have done here. We're going to do something else. And so, Connecticut civil procedure is completely different than federal civil procedure. Just a different universe. And we've got motions to strike and motions for summary judgment, but how lawsuits are filed and play out are completely different in state court than they are in federal court, right? And most cases are in state court for a variety of reasons. So I just always feel like it's really bizarre to me that we have this high barrier to entry that doesn't, in fact, force students to learn things that that they actually do.
I also think it's very interesting because I've been reading a lot of things that have been saying like law school is like the new MBA for people who don't know what they want to do and but know they want to go back to school. Law school's the like new answer. Where I don't know if you have thoughts on that, but I think the like what I've been hearing is like that wasn't always a thing. And now I can name quite a few people from my local high school that are starting their law school journey, and I can assure you like you would not have predicted some of us to be going to law school, but I think it's because it's just like the new norm. But I think its effect on who's taking the bar exam and, the future, group of lawyers that we're going to have is changing. It's evolving based on who's going to law school.
When I went to law school and I applied, it was always, well, you can do anything with a law degree.
Okay.
Okay, it was sort of like a thing, and they're like, oh, Tony La Russa was managing like the Cardinals, a Hall of Fame baseball manager. Like he was
He went to law school.
He went to law school, right? And sort of this like sort of idea that a law degree is like sort of a liberal capstone degree. Like I've never accepted that. I think the reason to go to law school is because you want to be a lawyer.
Right.
There are a lot of ways one can add to society or contribute or make money or do a whole host of things without
going to
law school. Going to law school is something that you have to do if you want to be a lawyer, which is the best reason to go to law school. And I'm kind of simple in that.
Yeah.
In that regard. But no, I think that I certainly had classmates who didn't know why they were there, didn't know what they wanted. Maybe they thought they went there because somebody told them they were a good arguer, or or that they would be a good lawyer. And I think that ultimately some of those people are the ones who were the most unhappy in law school and became really, I think, the first to get out of the profession.
Sure. You have to want it. You have to be there for the right reasons.
And that's not to say that it's a bad thing. Like I had friends, thinking of two of them specifically, one of them went to become a prosecutor. He said, oh, no, this is too boring for me. And now he works for the FBI hostage rescue team. Like he likes the action.
Yeah, sounds cool.
And I'm sure his law degree is useful in writing up warrants, but he really likes the thrill of like jumping out of helicopters and driving tanks and things. And another very good law school classmate friend of mine, he went and did the same thing, thought he wanted to be a prosecutor, and then said, not for me, and ends up working for Amtrak. And gets interested in regional planning and is now like a town manager. And again, like having a legal background, I'm sure is valuable to him in a lot of different ways, because when you're doing these things, you have to interact with lawyers and laws, and different things. But I think that those are two good examples of people who they found their way after law school.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Both really smart, both really talented, both really capable, and both, if they wanted to, could be amazing practicing lawyers.
Right.
But they ultimately decided that this was a sort of stop on their journey and to get out. But I think that is an interesting thing. And I mean, my 2 cents is just like, if you think that you want to be a lawyer, whatever that means to you, and lawyers have very different jobs. My job is very different than somebody who does a lot of real estate, is very different than somebody who's in-house counsel or somebody who does tax law, or my friend who does cyber insurance stuff. Like all these are very different universes. But I think ultimately it's like, do you want to be the one who's giving legal advice to people?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to be solving legal problems? Like that is
it's a good question to start with when deciding is law school for me.
Yeah, I think it's a question that I would ask myself, or I'd ask anybody who wants to go to law school. Like, do you want to be a lawyer? Because sort of if you don't, like, there are better, cheaper ways to spend 3 years, and there are also amazing paths to incredible careers that do not involve learning about mens rea or consideration or offer and acceptance and things like that. All right, so gonna wrap it up. We're gonna get to some of the important stuff.
Exciting.
I think maybe we covered this, but I'm gonna ask it a different way. which is like if you could, go back and, tell yourself, somewhere before law school, like what is like, tell younger Claire, like what would you say to her?
I would just say trust your gut. And sometimes that means taking a step back from law school. My law school experience has been unpredictable. I have taken jobs that I did not think I would be doing simultaneously with law school. I mean, for example, I did not think I was going to be working at a daycare for 2 years during law school, but that's what my path led me into. And I think there's been numerous times where I felt like, okay, well, I need to find a new job. Like, clearly this isn't serving me. And my advice to that earlier Claire, I would just say, no, like if you're happy and you like what you're doing and it's serving its purpose, you're making money, you're, allowing yourself to have a break from the demands of law school. I mean, continue on that path and don't care about, whatever you think is what you should be doing.
I think that's great advice. Great way to end this talk. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to ask of every guest.
Okay.
Which is like, all right, so you're you get to order a hamburger, veggie burger, whatever it is, burger of some sort.
Yeah.
It could be a mushroom burger. I don't know. I don't know what the kids eat, but like for me, it's a hamburger.
Okay, I'm a cheeseburger, but
cheeseburger's fine. What toppings go on your hamburger or cheeseburger?
Ooh. Okay, well, to keep it simple, like I love when my dad grills a cheeseburger. I'm not really picky with cheese, and in fact, I'm lactose intolerant, so I enjoy all cheese. But I usually do red onions and mustard.
Red onions and mustard
on a cheeseburger.
Sounds like a good dinner.
Yeah.
So that is awesome. It would be my first time on this podcast saying it, but I am of the opinion that the proper toppings for a burger, not that there are wrong toppings, but just gotta have a take, right? This is the internet. I need some opinion. I'm a ketchup,
Ooh.
mayo, and pickles person.
Ooh.
I can take an onion. Okay. I could leave an onion. I'm a little indifferent on that. Sometimes a caramelized onion's good.
Yeah.
But sometimes like the texture of an onion doesn't vibe for me, but I respect it.
But no tomato is the important part.
No, tomato does not belong as a topping. Lettuce, I'm not a rabbit. Like that does not belong on my hamburger. I am sorry about that. I could go mustard, and I could throw mustard into the mix. I could be okay with that, but
I do love mayo. Like I like mayo on just about everything. But ketchup is a no. I'm just not a tomato person.
Okay. I'm not I like tomatoes. Ketchup is, I could take it or leave it, but I feel like on a burger, ketchup and mayo is my answer, and pickles. Okay. Well, Claire, thank you so much for coming on and our very first episode of the Law Student Lounge. Not going to be our last. We're going to do a bunch of these and really just talk about law school.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Ryan McKeen in the Law Student Lounge, where real law students talk about their real lives. Are you a law student with a story to tell? Learn how you can share your story with us in the episode description. And join us next time in the Law Student Lounge.